Hello everyone and welcome back to Indie Insight. This episode I sat down with composer for Inscription, one of the best indie games from last year, Jonah Senzel, to talk all about his personal projects, Inscription, his scoring for other titles by Daniel Mullins, The Hex and Pony Island, along with even gauging some of his reactions to fan-made scores, mashups and covers. If you'd like to support the channel in any way, shape or form, please do check the links down below. Also check out the links to Jonah's work as well and all the featured artists throughout this video. So I won't keep you waiting any longer. Sit back, relax and enjoy. Jonah, thank you so much for joining me today. As your, I presume, previous website, because there was two websites I found when looking you up, you were described as a guy that makes music games, and music for games, which I think is a very short but apt description of just a small amount of the work that you've done so far. Thank you so much for joining me today, first of all.
Hey, glad to be here.
I want to ask, first of all, because I'm going to start near the beginning, and I say the beginning in a sense of the beginning of maybe your educational transition towards music. You obviously graduated from Purchase College in New York with a bachelor's of music and then additional studies in new media. You then did Trust and Play European School of Urban Game Design. You know, where did this sort of love for games first come from before college? And then what made you want to pursue a career in particularly games composition? But I know you do a lot of other stuff on the side as well.
Yeah, basically I've been playing games, video games mostly, and other games, as we all do, for a really long time. And actually, technically, my kind of interest in games predates my interest in music. Not by that much, but I think I started getting into music seriously when I was like 13, something like that. 12, 13, 14 was when I kind of was like starting to, it was starting to be a real part of my life. And then to me, writing for games was kind of a natural progression of that, like marrying these two things that I really like to do. I wouldn't say I had like a particular fixation on games music growing up, though. Like I wasn't, super in touch with every soundtrack of it. I was more like, I loved playing video games for a really long time. And then I loved making music. And then afterwards, the two kind of came together as one thing. And then making games, I would say, that started more in college when I was it's sort of started out as like me getting into thoughts about like, oh, implementation, like I could be a composer, but also I could do implementation for game engines or something. And then I was like, oh, wait, actually I'll just make my own like music game things. And then that sort of slowly, like there's just like steps and then I'm like, well, video games are awesome, but I also like making other types of games or like other types of like media art and stuff. So it was just kind of like everything starts to spiral out of control in a very positive way in terms of like one interest, one passion, then like you kind of branch out into the next one and then to the next one. And I've always been someone that kind of has multiple interests at any given time.
Mm. Is it fair to say kind of your experience with games, whether it's creating them or creating music for them, is, we often talk about there's this distinction between different types of games. Some will be more cinematic and more story driven, and some will be heavily more gameplay driven, that sort of element. Do you find yourself leaning towards, when you're creating a project, more into the camp of trying to get an emotive reaction out of the audience through the work you're creating, as opposed to creating this traditional gameplay driven experience?
Yeah, I would say that none of the stuff I make in terms of like when I make my own game or game-like projects, let's say, are traditional. I don't know exactly if they almost lean sort of towards one and sort of towards the other. Like some stuff I make will be like kind of, there's no gameplay elements, you're just sort of exploring this like interactive world thing, but there's not like rote sort of points and systems and stuff like that. I've done one, maybe two kind of narrative based things. I did a narrative based game for Ludum Dare a couple of years ago that I really liked, called Old Friends. That was really fun. And then I have like other work now that I'm working on that's just weird and is more about inventing kind of systems to create things rather than inventing specific games, inventing like these I almost said analog, but I hate using the word analog to mean stuff done on like pen and paper and in writing, because anyway, that's a very picky thing. But I like pen and paper systems and stuff for like creating other things and games that are just written on paper, but you play them in the real world, stuff like that. So I guess it really runs the gambit. But the only thing, I don't usually make stuff, yeah, that's too traditional. And I like that. Sometimes maybe to my detriment also, but I think mostly I have the most fun when I feel that in some way, regardless of how successful the actual experience is, I'm at least trying to push some form of the gauntlet, whether that's in audio or whether that's in games, or yeah, for everything.
Yeah, and I think the sort of wide variety of work you've done kind of really speaks true to that in a lot of ways. But what people will be most familiar with regards to your work will be your composition work for Daniel Mullins, namely with obviously Inscription last year, which completely blew up and is on a lot of people list who've played it. And it's a very difficult game to talk about without spoiling. So I will very quickly mention for any audio listeners that I will probably allow for spoilers at this stage. If you haven't played Inscription, it's one hell of a game and everyone should check it out. So maybe do that before listening on. But I want to start first of all, because that wasn't obviously the first game you worked on with Daniel. Started working with him back in 2015. Where did that opportunity come about? Kind of walk me through, how did you meet Daniel and all that?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I don't know if this is. I think it's documented. So I feel like I've answered this one somewhere before. Not saying that's too obvious a question or anything, but I'm curious as to like how public this kind of stuff is. Like I met Daniel on Reddit actually, completely randomly, and I had posted on the game, I think it's game development classifieds or maybe regular game dev. I had posted on that forum about offering free music for games because I was just trying to like do anything I could. And yeah, I got a lot of weird responses. I worked a lot of strange jobs, and it's the internet. So luckily, nothing too strange, nothing too weird or anything like that. But it is interesting because the anonymity means that you kind of have to scope out like the vibes. Like I would end up, realizing a bit through a project that I was working with someone who's in like fifth grade, and they're like doing their class movement, like, oh, like this is, they just present really well over text or something. And I myself was still a teenager. This was before college. And so, yeah, I posted on there. I worked on an unreleased game of Daniel's. He was working with another partner at that point. And I just made some music for him. He liked it. And when it came time for Pony Island, when he kind of did that jam version, and then he was going to be like, oh, actually, I'm going to make a published version. It just sort of made sense because we had already worked before. And I think even there's one or two tracks on Pony Island that are migrated over. Now, this is like, maybe I shouldn't admit that, but yeah, there's like one or two tracks there that started out as tracks for some other that previous project. But I think it worked out really well, and yeah, I had a lot of fun making those that music, and it was just a different thing. I think Dan was older than me and more experienced, but he was also kind of had never really done too much in terms of putting out his own stuff on like a real public scale. So when things started to get popular, I think it was like new for the both of us. I mean, obviously it's his game, but for me also, I was like, whoa, this is really cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's good that you brought up Pony Island, because I was going to ask about it, because it's a fantastic game in its own right. And I think it probably gets a little bit overshadowed now by Inscription because of its success. But, Vice Gaming described your phenomenal score for that game, first of all, as a dynamic and bubbling tribute to Ape and Melty that stands comfortably alongside the likes of Undertale and Shovel Knight in its inventiveness and listen without playing appeal. How do you kind of approach that sort of, like, because that's very high praise to be compared to some of those big games like Shovel Knight and Undertale. Is that something that you take in your stride, or is that something that you kind of, it invites this sense of pressure for future work?
Actually for me, it's interesting because, Pony Island feels far away now also and stuff. And it's sort of like the whole thing of success bringing pressure. and like praise and stuff bringing pressure. I was more worried about that on Inscryption, to be honest, because for Pony Island, like that came out, it had this whole thing, it had its whole life cycle. I felt like I had my little, moment or whatever. And, part of me was sort of like, okay, like that's like one of the problem. Maybe that's the biggest thing I'm like ever going to do in my career is like that game. And that's fine. And it was pretty big and whatever. And then Inscryption just like blew up. And it was this time around that I started to be more worried about the kind of the publicity of it. It's not as much about like people saying nice things and then me feeling as if I have to hold up to them. It's more about like being part of this team. Like what's the next thing going to be, and that the pressure would be, that it's as good from like a fan perspective. And that kind of stuff. But I'm glad to say I've kind of had the opposite reaction. I really don't. I never feel that pressure because to me the music part is just a lot of fun, and really the energy comes from Dan, because he is one of the most. He sort of has this superpower of being like extremely immune to like the pitfalls of success. I feel like where basically after everything, like after every game, like Pony Island came out, did really well, and he was like, oh cool, like chill, I'll just keep making like weird stuff that I keep making. And the Hex came out, which like was a super long, that was the middle game between Pony Island and Inscryption, and that took a huge amount of time, a huge amount of effort. And I think it was a really cool game, and it came out and people kind of liked it. But in terms of like the commercial success of it and the publicity of it, it was not as big as Pony Island. And it was sort of like I was like, oh, like there's like the sophomore slump or whatever they say. The second project you put out is often difficult. So, but Dan like basically was like, okay, cool. He just sort of like keeps going. And I think the thing that I really admire about him is that I see him as somebody who kind of just has like principles, and it's just like, I'm just going to make a game that I like, and I like the way it is, and not worry too much. I think he knows that he wants to give the fans some elements that are like always going to be good because they're like his signature in terms of like meta stuff and it being kind of creepy or having some sort. So there's that there, but I feel as though he's really an expert at not falling into this loop of anxiety about like what's coming next or what's coming out or how is it going to be viewed by people. And that energy just like transfers to me. And it's also it's like such a small, it's like me, him, and then there's some auxiliary artists that work as well. But yeah, that tiny team also just makes it much more, we have a really personal relationship. It's really relaxed. So I'm excited for doing new stuff. I know that's a very long answer to the question, but it's something that was really on my mind for a while. Like, am I going to, is whatever happens in the future, for whatever other games, is that going to be like, oh, now like Inscryption is there and now I'm going to feel the real pressure and I'm going to like everything I write, I'm going to be nervous about whether or not the melody is good and stuff. And it's like, no, not really. Once I actually sit down at the computer or the keyboard and like turn stuff on and start writing, then I'm just writing again. And I have that confidence in myself that, people are going to come for my style, and that's something that is just there. I don't have to, like reinvent it every time.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask a specific question surrounding the score of Inscryption, and I think it kind of speaks to the larger discography of your work with Daniel, because there's obviously, as you mentioned at the Hex earlier, that has a huge element in which each of the characters has their own individual traits, and that then informs your score on them and changing that in different ways. And anyone who would have been familiar with that could have maybe possibly seen the switch in perspective or gameplay mode within Inscryption at some point or another. The score, it changes during those elements to kind of reflect the new sort of visual elements that are on screen. How much in advance did you know that Daniel was going to do something like such a big change like that? When do you kind of find out in that process? Is it near the beginning, or is it just kind of along the way?
I think, I'm pretty sure he's talked publicly about this, but there's a whole thing where Inscryption went through like different sort of stages of development where it was very like what it was going to be as a core experience kind of changed over time, where originally the game was going to be structured as this kind of anthology, and he like had the card game and he's like, okay, I've got this card game, I've got this other game, which is like an 8-bit game. And then he's like, I'm still figuring out the third one. And it's going to be kind of some anthology. And there's going to be like meta elements that stitch it together. And you can kind of see the DNA of that in Inscription, like how it could have started as like a 3-game anthology with an overarching meta story. Like it's kind of that, but except they're all the same game in sort of. So I knew that there was going to be some 8-bit stuff at some point, and that I was starting with this other thing. But that's another like reason why we work well together, and reason why it's kind of weird that we just sort of happened to chance upon working together, because for me it's really key that I have enough variety in my work to feel like it's fresh. I mean, I'm like obsessed with doing lots of different things, and that's also in music. I kind of need to be stimulated in different axes, like, oh, do this kind of music, now do this kind of music, or do this kind of stuff. And now, like, I think if someone came to me and was like, just do the entire thing exactly like this with absolutely, just like 10 tracks of the exact same style with no variation and stuff, I think I would be like, I don't know. I mean, I could do it. It would be fine. It would be fun. But I really enjoy those kind of curveballs, and I absolutely see them as a positive rather than negative. And the 8-bit stuff, it's always refreshing to switch between like recorded music sounds and synthesized sounds, because they give different focuses to the music. And to me, yeah, it was really like, okay, there's 3 different palettes that I'm all going to treat almost as their own worlds and their own soundtracks. And I was also very used to doing that from the Hex, which had kind of basically 7 of those, like 6 for all the characters and 1 overworld, and they were all supposed to be like in-game music of their own versions. So that's what I've been saying when people bring up the 3 structure thing, is it's like the Hex was kind of my like training grounds, because after that it's like, oh yeah, what, 3 games, that's fine, that's doable. Yeah, there's not 7, so it's even easier than last time.
Do you, out of those 3 sections, this is a really superficial question, but do you have a favorite, perhaps? Is there one that you have at least fond memories of, maybe a funny story surrounding one of those worlds, or trying to score one of the elements of it?
I think I think fans like sections 1 and 2 like 1 the most, and then 2 there's a couple of tracks that people have really responded to, and I might say that my favorite was the 3rd section, to write, at least, because although I liked them all, like I really liked them all, and the section 1 has like some interesting stuff in terms of mixing in the sound design with the music. Like there's lots of rhythmic sound stuff that I hadn't really done before, and also exploring minimalism in a way that I wasn't used to. Okay, do a track, but it has to be in the background and minimal while also being intense, so playing around with a couple of elements, that's new for me. But part 3, I got to have a bit more fun. I got to play around with, like, the boss tracks are these weird, glitchy, kind of like chopped up things. And then the main overworld track is much more like ambient and strange. And I always, my favorite tidbit of the game, which if you poke around, I'm sure you can find me talking about this somewhere else. But probably my favorite tidbit of the game is there's in the overworld track for part 3, I wrote like a Bach style piano piece. Which, I mean, that's giving it credit to call it a quote unquote Bach style piano piece. I took piano lessons and I cannot play like the Bach Invention 1 or whatever. I got like 60% of the way through it, but I can fake it. And then it gets stretched to that length of the middle section of the track, which is something like 4 or 5 minutes out of 10 seconds of music. So that was really fun, doing stuff like that and getting to play around with those textures of what does it sound like? Nothing. You can't put a word exactly what is that inch? Well, it's synthesized, but it's oftentimes a synthesized element on top of something that's real, or a real element that gets like pushed through a computer that interprets it to be something else. I'm talking about like the actual audio stuff, not the story. But yeah, so maybe part 3 was the most fun to make, at least.
When it comes to kind of Inscryption, I couldn't help, because when I was going through your previous works, I obviously came across your experimental indie folk album In Waves. And I was listening to a bit of that, and I particularly from the first track, I remember Going, I believe it's called, there's a sort of a scraping sound at the beginning that I couldn't, at least in my head from having listened to Inscription, that very much reminds me of the first World sort of, I suppose, sound in general. Do you think that maybe that album influenced you, or at least inspired you a little bit when going forward to do Inscription? Do you think it's something you've taken on board? Because obviously it's quite tonally different in comparison to Inscription, for sure.
I don't know. I think for me, there's a lot of people sort of have this is got a carefully formed idea, because it's gonna sound like I'm saying like, oh, you're just innately whoever you are as an artist, and that's permanent. And I don't believe that. I really don't believe that. I think that people change a lot over time, and you can grow as an artist. But there is something about, if you give 2 composers the exact same situation, one will make one decision and another will make another decision. And we all, as composers and sound designers, have these different boxes that we reach to, like tools or shortcuts or things of like, I'll just throw this effect on it, or I'll just, this would be great if I did guitar but way up on the neck. And some people will like have that thought all the time, and other people will have, oh, actually I should play an organ over this, and they like are constantly putting an organ over the top of stuff. And I think also many musicians are like, it's almost like, I got to stop doing that, like this stuff that I do all the time. Well, I'm always putting the same effect, I'm always doing this, but that sort of creates your like musical, your composer sort of DNA. And that is something that you can sort of hear across people's music in different genres and different forms and stuff, because at the end of the day, what it is like trying out different stuff and finishing it and being like, oh, that sounds good. I like the way that sounds. Like that, most of composition is kind of changing stuff and making the decision, making the choice. Once you've got past the basic mechanics of like how to sort of write music and throw stuff against the wall, you decide exactly what you want. So my brain being my brain, I think it's more like I made that decision once and then probably remade that decision somewhere in Inscription and was like, cool, nice. And maybe, writing that album, maybe I was forming that like flavor tasting part of my brain, and it liked it because of something I did there. Yeah, that's very possible.
So when, obviously we mentioned earlier, Daniel's games are weird, I suppose is the word to say, but in a very good way. Do you think that, I suppose, your love of composition, especially for his sort of games, do you think there would be an element of your love lost if it was for a more streamlined main game that isn't as weird as Daniel's are? If you had to make a more, I suppose, traditional, normal, grounded score, as opposed to all the weird, wacky stuff you get to do with stuff like the Hex, Pony Island, and Inscription?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it would be more boring. I mean, I'm very lucky that I'm in a position to write for someone who has found success, is very good to work with, and also has stuff that I appreciate and like. That's a very rare position to be in. Usually you kind of get, one or two of those elements. You can write for somebody who is like, has very little publicity and is doing amazing stuff and is good to work with, or they have a lot of publicity and doing amazing stuff, but they're terrible to work with, or, that you can kind of mix and match, but that all of them together is great. And I think the best part is that he leaves a lot of stuff sort of open. I'll get a reference track, or I'll get a suggestion, or I'll get an idea, but we've been working long enough that I know that I have that artistic freedom to push something further or make it different. And not only do I have that freedom, that's kind of the expectation. And that's what he wants from me. And that's really exciting, because I think some, not to disparage any sectors or anything like that, but sometimes in the mobile space or in the sort of traditional space of like a huge studio that's contracting to make a game, you get sort of stuck in this thing where like all you do is write virtual orchestral music, and it has to sort of be exactly like this, and it has to sound just like this other score. And to me, that's sort of taking out all of the fun in the composition. To me, I can put up with all the like annoyances that exist. I mean, actually, I mostly just like really like writing music, but sometimes, of course, there are things that are annoying or hard. And like the thing that makes it all worth it is like being able to express yourself weirdly and with whatever you want and do new stuff. And I think if that element weren't there, it becomes a much different job and a much different thing. It'd still probably be fun, but I think it's much more gratifying, and it feels for me more like I'm fulfilling my potential to be working with someone who's making stuff that's kind of out there.
So we've talked a good bit about Inscription. This is a one part of the interview I've been really looking forward to, which is I've scoured the internet for people who have done covers or interpretations or even complete reinventions and trying to make a score for Inscription. I've got a few different ones here. So one I've got is a complete just guitar recreation of the Death Card Cabin track. Then we've got a remix of a mashup of one track along with a different game, and I want to get your thoughts on that. And then one completely fan-made track for Inscription, which I'm not sure if you've heard yet, but I kind of want to get all your thoughts.
I'm a huge egoist, so maybe I've heard some of these. I poke around occasionally on the internet and stuff and see what people are doing, but let's see. I like the font. That's nice. I don't think I have seen this one.
Brilliant, even better.
Oh, this is great. Yeah, I mean the first thing even to be said is that covers. Well, I'll listen for a second. Talk directly over it. Yeah, it's super good. The covers in general are just the most the highest form of flattery at a big level, like more than money or support or messages or even like award nominations or journalism coverage. Like covers are the kind of ultimate thing that makes a composer feel good, like because it's some sort of, I don't know, recognition that someone else who's a musician, that I think that's where it comes to, is that relatingness has some connection to your music, and that I'm always still in awe of it, that like people go to the lengths to care about it and make covers. And yeah, it's just the best feeling, you know, of all the types of support.
What I always find so impressive from them is that you can have someone, you know, you will have done obviously the Inscription score, and there'll be a load of different stuff you've done in the background with the audio, and then these people will come in with just a guitar, and they'll have to manipulate the guitar in whatever way to try and make it sound as close to that as possible. Is a genuine question regarding the score. Have you ever thought about releasing guitar tabs or even sheet music for the actual scores themselves?
Yeah, this is really embarrassing, and maybe I shouldn't admit this. When I see this like tab, I'm actually thinking the opposite. I'm like, oh, cool, I could probably go back and learn how to play that, because I kind of am like just become sort of like a chimpanzee at the recording stage, where I just like stare at something, write the melody, immediately record it, and then like there's specifically in Inscription, there's like later, this piece is the first thing I ever wrote in the game. I wrote it like super early, and I wrote it on solo guitar. I just like sat down. I actually used, okay, it's finished. Also, this is incredible. Rybeck guitar, thank you so much. This is great. And I'm gonna check out the tab too. But yeah, this is the first thing I ever wrote for the game. And I used this like tuning that's supposedly some tuning from the traditional like Canadian something or other, because I guess I don't know what the official lore is. At the time, it was like Inscription was set in rural Canada, technically, in that cabin. I don't know if that's still the case. and I just like sat down and kind of like jammed for a really long time and changed. And that's why that first track is so long, actually, is because like I was sitting down and working with it for a really long time. And then I took a big snippet of that. But then at the end of the game, as one of the very last things, this Daniel was like, okay, so I want that guitar melody to come back and be very somber as like this. There's like this goodbye scene, and it's like this really sad version or a heartfelt version of it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I had like had to retranscribe that for something else on the keyboard, and it was fine. But it's actually way easier to retranscribe something on keyboard than it is on guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know what tuning it was. I didn't know what was going on, and I'm like going back and trying to pick apart. I'm like, how do I play this? Luckily, it was a really stripped down version, kind of like this guitar cover, which is just the melody, because some of the in-between parts are when the weird tuning comes in, and I could probably go back and scour the recordings to find what the tuning is, but I didn't really know what it was. And that one is quite simple. I think it's just like drop D when you just do the melody. So thankfully, I could figure out how to play like just the melody notes. But in terms of releasing scores and sheet music, yeah, it's kind of funny. I've gotten some requests, but it's weird because I don't use scores at all in my writing process. So it's kind of like when people, I think people imagine it as like, oh, like Jonah's going to publish, the folder he has on his computer full of all the Inscryption scores. And what it actually is like going back and wading through things and recreating it. So there's a whole profession called engraving, which is just not even writing the music, not even taking the music and putting it on sheet music, but like, how do you do all the symbols, and which symbols should this be, and how should this look, and what's the page layout? So it's like, you have to get it all into sheet music. You have to make sure that it's playable and legible. And then you have to stylistically make sure that it's all on the page and all this. It's an entire art form in itself. Maybe eventually I'll do it. I think for the time being, some people, if people are really into it, they can look, there's like some piano tutorials of some stuff out there somewhere. But yeah, I probably not on the horizon. I don't know. Maybe if someone gave me a really good reason to do it, I could, but we'll see.
Before we move on to the next one, I have one it's an odd specific question surrounding the first piece, because I've listened to it a number of times, and even when playing the game, there's a part in, this is going to be really specific, so if you don't know, that's totally fine. There's a part in that track where there's kind of this ringing sound in the back, where it's like almost like a phone or a siren. It like beep beep beep.
Oh, I'm curious about this. I'm
trying to remember if I can. Obviously, I can't do more than just like say what it is. But the funny story about it, anyways, and I can show it to you later. But the entire time when I played Inscription, when I'm in college accommodation at the moment, so when I was playing, the sound of that is very similar to the phone that goes off in my room if there's someone at the door. So literally every 5 minutes in that cabin scene, I'd be like, is there someone at the door? What is going on? I was afraid like someone had gotten locked out and I had just left them outside. And even now, if I go back and listen to the score, if I'm just sitting down, I'll know it's coming, but I'll still instinctively look there. So I both find that amazing, and I also hate you at some point for that as well, because it's now just giving me this impulse.
That's really funny. It's probably, there's like a whole synth bed of something going on there. I mean, I haven't even opened that project for really long, that project file for like forever. So it's probably some weird synth interacting with some weird effect that I like threw on it or something. It could be like a smoke detector in my house going off too. I don't know. You never discount the unprofessionalism of like, if you hear something and you're like, that must be intentional. Like maybe it's not.
But I think your score anyways for that element, there's meant to be paranoia in that cabin when you're there, because you're like, what's going on? I think you got it for the wrong reason, but you got there with me in the end anyways. So congrats.
It was just for you. Yeah.
Thank you. So the next one I have up here, it's not more so of a cover as it is a mashup. I don't know, have you played Hunt Showdown?
I have not.
No, so there's a track in that Rise Up Dead Man, which is actually kind of more Western inspired, but it actually goes very well with the Trapper and the Trader. which someone has mashed up to put into one score altogether. So
okay, cool. This sounds familiar. Maybe I've seen it, but it would have been a while ago.
Well, it's got
Okay.
55,000 views,
not.
so it's one of the more popular mashups, I believe, at least that I could find.
Oh wow, this is awesome. Ah, okay, so it's also the like humming vibe.
Yeah.
Ooh. This is so cool. I mean, this track is like, I guess my track is like an alternate reality version of this track, I should say, because it came before mine. This really makes me want to play Hunt Showdown.
You should get onto Daniel, get some DLC content for Hunt Showdown Inscription.
That would be cool. And the mashup is done so well because there actually is a fair amount of frequency content and like stuff going on in my track, and I think probably in this track too. And to get the tempos synced up like that and get everything working coherently, it's kind of like people don't really see it when they do your mashups. I think people think that it's just like a drag and drop process, but this is really well done. And I like the little background like synth stuff. Okay, I'll finish it later.
No worries, I don't mean to rush you. We can finish it.
No, that's fine. This is super good. Kex Terminator. Also a great name. Kex Terminator 78.
I am extremely excited for the next one I'm about to show you, because it's not every day that you get someone obviously doing a cover of your song or an interpretation, but someone actually making their own score based off a soundtrack you've made. And the person I reached out to ask if we could use this audio was very much, yes, I would be honored if you would look at it. So there's no expectation here, but I think this person loves you, Jonah. So
oh, great. Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, I have sometimes my only true feeling of celebrity is when people email me, maybe not my only, but yeah, when people email me, I feel very cool, because when I was in high school, I sent like spam email to a bunch of game composers all the time, being like, how do I get in the game industry? I love your soundtracks and stuff, like constantly emailing indie game composers, and it's come full circle, which feels very cool.
I think just some context is, I believe yes, that the afterwards, because they've done 2 songs based off your score, and I picked one of them, and the second one is they've actually done a very similar world approach to you as well, where they've tried to switch up the tone of their second song altogether. So I believe when they were kind of talking about in the comments, they kind of liked this one that I'm showing you here, Old Tales, is kind of an ending piece for the game. So that's about the best context I have at the moment. So
okay, I like the little kind of waves sweep on the noise. That's nice. Oh, this is cool. There's like this sort of ticking clock sound thing that's really nice, like holding the rhythm. Oh yeah, I really love the use of the whatever patches or synth or real intro. Maybe they're samples, and that ambiguity is really cool, because those lower sounds almost sound like a chime or a gong or something being played. And whenever I can't tell what's being used, like is it just a synth or something else, that's always a good sign. Okay, a little subtle delay coming in. This is really nice. This is reminding me of my style when I was younger as well, in terms of these sort of but the very fancy and annoying word for it, I guess, is an ostinato. I'm trying to think of just like repeating patterns. this focus on melody and stuff with some other elements. Okay, now we've got another synth in. Oh, great. Yeah, this really reminds me of like how I wrote music for a really long time, and that's good. Like I feel like I have different eras and stuff, and this reminds me of an earlier era. Mm-hmm. And that kind of glitchy lead that's like sort of high fidelity and sort of low fidelity, and the emphasis on melody. Oh, very interesting melody too. It's in kind of a ambiguous scale where there's some like it's called modal scale. So like there's some notes in there that wouldn't normally be in there. Oh, in the slide. Oh, this is great. Oh yeah. Okay, I'm at 254. That modal stuff is so good, and that's that melody changing over time too. I'm sorry, I'm talking over, but I'm also trying to listen now. Is that's so great. Like having a melody like that really travels and changes over time and is unexpected in those pleasant ways with those like weird modal notes is awesome. Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, Techno Alchemist. Yeah, awesome. Feel free to shoot me an email, anyone of any of these, even just to say hello. I love, saying hi to people or getting their giving feedback or getting their thoughts on stuff. It's always fun. Mm-hmm. I for the Pony Island, when when the vinyl came out, I put together an impromptu mailing list and sent all the people that I could find that did covers vinyls. Maybe wink, maybe I'll be able to do that again eventually. Who's to say? But yeah, thank you so much.
This is a call to arms. Everyone do their Inscription scores, so you could buy 1 million vinyls to send to
legally. I need to legally make a 1 second thing, and this could be. But yeah, can you should link me also the other one. Maybe I'll poke at it now. I also want to just to listen to for later.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll send it over to you. I think it's on their channel there. Let me see. Alone. Here it is.
Oh, maybe I can, if it's just right on their fan channel.
It's the Alone one, an Inscription fan song.
Oh, cool.
Which I believe is a very different tone. So
totally different. Oh, what a lush synth. This chord progression is so awesome. Okay, I'm gonna keep listening to this for a second.
No worries.
Yeah, that first 4 chords are so amazing. Mm-hmm. Such a different vibe too. Lots of range. Okay, I'm gonna pause this because or else I'm just gonna sit through the entire thing kind of staring because it's so like dreamy. And really like the harmony on those chords though. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And also the kind of minimal thing. I could just automatically picture that being in some game or in a movie or something. That's super nice. So amazing job, Techno Alchemist. And thanks everyone. Like I said, I really do mean it in terms of covers are like like nothing else, it's that feeling of someone supporting you basically with their time and with their art, and just that feeling that maybe you've kind of influenced some part of somebody's musical journey, because I think all composers have felt the other end of that, which is learning other composers' music and looking up to other composers. So then when it comes sort of full circle, it's just like, what, me, mine thing? Okay, cool. I get like what? It's really cool.
Well, high praise anyways for all those people who've made amazing covers and mashups and everything else. I'm going to move on completely now from Inscription. We're going to talk about, I know I'm a master of transition, but I'm going to move on completely from these. And I want to talk a bit more about some of the other work you do outside. So all that interactive media and new form media and all that other great stuff that you're doing. Firstly, I want to start though, because, you know, obviously I mentioned at the beginning that you went to the European School of Urban Game Design, which is in Athens, Greece, if I'm correct in saying that.
It's not really anywhere. That's interesting.
Okay.
I can touch on that, but yes, it's somewhat based in Athens,
Mhm.
and I lived there for many years.
Mhm.
Well, 2.5 years, something like that.
And I touch on that because I was reading on your website, obviously you have a writing section where you've kind of done a little kind of almost journal entry style elements over the last few years. I think the last one was in 2020, if I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah, it was about a year, something like that, on those entries.
And in that you were talking a little bit about COVID and obviously shut down in the European Union. I mean, you don't need to ask me twice about it. I know all about it. But you mentioned that you stayed in Greece for that period. Kind of walk me through, what was that experience like? Because obviously that's a very big decision to make. So what ultimately led you to make that decision, and how did you find it helped you in the long term?
Yeah. Well, one piece of information that's useful to know. So Trust and Play is a school in name only. Basically, it's essentially a European arts program, but it's essentially it's kind of like a support structure for doing a project. So we would have like monthly meetings, and then I would have much more frequent meetings with my direct coordinators, not coordinators, collaborators. That's where it is before. So it wasn't like a full. It didn't occupy my full time, at least definitely not at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, in September of 2019, I left for Greece, and I arrived back in America like a month ago, I think, something like that. Allegedly, let's say. I don't know. Allegedly, some might say that I have arrived back in America. I don't know what I'm publicly gonna. Yeah. But yeah, so I was originally supposed to go for 9 months, and it was like over 2 years in the end, 2.5 years about. It was, to me, it was a relatively easy decision to make at the time, because I had been enjoying my time in Greece. Greece is very cheap, and also it's very much not moving home to my parents' house, which is because I was abroad, especially. I mean, I know many people just moved in with their parents from that never would normally, or would never have a reason to. And for me, especially, I was abroad, so there was no even, I wasn't going to go and get an apartment in whenever that was, March or April of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of felt like, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to wait it out and see what happens. And at the time, it was much better for COVID. Things went back and forth anyway. But yeah, so it was basically just like I didn't really want to cut short my time. And in the end, I ended up massively extending my time. And I'm very glad for all of that, because it was a great experience being there and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. On your website, anyways, and the About You section, you kind of describe your work by saying, I enjoy constructing a framework in which people interact, where the enjoyment of the work is not provided directly by me, but by what you uniquely experience based on broad instruction and systemic design. How much do you think this blends into your music as much as it does your other art forms?
To me, I think the music is totally separate, right? Like, it's very much different, especially when I'm writing, linear recorded music. So music, to me, to get kind of conceptual, let's say, music is a linear medium. It exists in time, and you can have interactive music, and you can have interactive music systems and all that. But in general, music exists as a linear medium, and the other work I do, what I'm trying to do is kind of make a thing. It's sort of like, rather than designing a toy, you're designing a sandbox, is kind of the comparison I like to make sometimes. Or like, rather than designing like a plastic truck. You're designing Lego. You're designing the thing that other people can use to make other things. So it's sort of one level removed. And to me, as weird as it is, as much as I would like to sort of make some overarching claim about how my music practice and my sort of like media arts practice and stuff, like they're all connected, I really feel as though they're very separate to me. And actually, I kind of like that as well, because I get to, when I get sick of one, go to the other and then go back and forth. And they provide really different things for me in my life. And to me, music has huge advantages in some ways as an art form, and also in other ways as an art form, like media arts and interactive art have big advantages as well. And they're just two different things that provide different experiences for me in my life, both creating them and also consuming them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In terms of interactive art, as we're talking about, you've done stuff that has been pure technology, a mix of technology and non-technology, and then just stuff that's completely not related to technology at all. I mean, we talked about Greece earlier. Some of the stuff you did there was the question answering machine, and other bits you've done as well. The Envelope Manifesto, which is completely non-tech related at all. There's the collection of interactive minimalist digital poems, Seasons, which is fantastic, by the way. I absolutely adore those. And my personal favorite, though, I have to say, is the 2 urban walks based on guided boards. Is it Derive or Derive?
Derive.
Derive.
I think it's Derive, but it's French anyway, so we're both going to mispronounce it.
But I mean, as soon as I saw that, I know exactly the next time I have free time, I'm going out and doing one of those walks. So I mean, I've just moved to a new city, so what better way to experience the new place you're in than when it's completely out of your control?
Great, yeah.
So do you, out of all those projects, I know you say that you kind of, if you can get bored, you can go to a different one, or you can kind of leave one. And it seems like it occupies definitely more of a hobby position in that way, as opposed to the music, which is a lot more of a business at this point. Do you have a favorite from those sort of personal projects you've done along the years? And if so, why?
I don't know. It's different. Like Question Answering Machine was related to Trust and Play. That's the project I went to go there to do, which is like, for people, it's the phone booth that you leave kind of information to different questions, playful and not, and then it's this sort of living archive that people can come back to and hear everyone from the surrounding area, what they've said. It all like lives inside of this phone. That was much bigger scale for me than, for example, the urban walks, which now I'm working on like a bigger series of urban walks that are all text-based, coming quote unquote soon. And the urban walks is something I did in, a week or a weekend or something like that. It was a very small project. So I think I can have success. I can be like, oh, that was a great small project, and this was a good big project, and this and that. Oh, well, just to touch on all of them, the Envelope Manifesto, I enjoyed that. That was a very long-term project that was leaving around these envelopes with notes in them and instructions and things like that. And each one has kits in it to make your own envelope and leave that envelope in public space. It's this sort of like self-growing project, but it's different because that was a very passive background thing that happened over a long course of time. But I have mixed. I don't know exactly how to describe where the media art stuff occupies in my life, because I think most people would consider it like hobby-like, and I kind of did for a while, but now I'm seeing it differently in terms of I don't necessarily attach things to how much money they make as their size in my life or in my work, because I've just realized there are forms that like make less money and are less out in the world. Who's the most famous person that writes urban walks? There isn't one, and it's like, it's guided.
Well, you now, because you've said it.
Yeah. I mean, there are people out there doing it and stuff, but they're usually in academia doing something else, or like me, they have another thing that supports them. And I just happen to be incredibly lucky that I really like to do the thing that supports me, and that it's its own practice in itself. Not just, although day jobs are great too. I think honestly, day jobs can be very useful, but it is something I love to do, and it also supports me. And then I have this other process. I don't know what the question was originally. I've just been rambling, but whatever one that covers it.
It was just, do you have a favorite one out of the projects you've done?
I guess question answering machine, probably, mostly because of the amount of pain that went into it. I did all the technical work, and I'll give a big shout out to this space, to the hacker space in Athens, which is amazing. It's a open space, so anyone from the public can come in and work there. And then over time, then I became a member. It's like a non-hierarchical space, just huge inspiration. Anyone who's looking to start a kind of like ground up grassroots space for people to make stuff. I think no one really like knows or talks about it, obviously, because it's in Athens, but I think it's crazy good. And most of the guys there are work on open source satellite engineering. So they helped me out a lot when I was like doing my electronics art projects and asking them questions. And yeah, so it's my favorite because it had the most blood, sweat, and tears put into it through technical hardware issues.
Now, I'm getting on to the part of the interview now. We're coming near to the end. So I've got to, I suppose, pull out the big guns. I've got to use the journalistic questions here now, the ones that I'm very much going to thrust on you and hope that I get an answer in return that I can then be like, look, I got this exclusive. But
great. That's exciting.
I have to ask, obviously we've seen online, Inscription are hiring different people to kind of, or Daniel is at least hiring different people to come on and help with Inscription. Is there anything else in the work with Inscription, or is that finalized now? That project is done?
I don't think I can say.
No.
I don't think I can give you anything on that. Not that I have a particularly exciting answer. I'll just say, even if it was, who's to say I would know one way or the other? But I think that particular thing, I think, is more of a technical role, the online thing, in terms of speculation and stuff. What that means about the future of Inscription, I don't really know.
And with regards to, obviously, I'm sure as Daniel has seen a lot of growth, I'm sure you're the exact same. You've seen a lot of growth and a lot of interest from the industry. Have there been any projects you've been approached for, or anything that you might be working on in the future that we're allowed to talk about now? Or is that something you're very much keeping in the background? Maybe you're taking a bit of a break and whatnot.
I'm doing a contract sound design job right now that's under like lock and key NDA. Like I didn't even tell my mom about it. She's like, well, you can tell me. And I'm like, no, I want to get in the habit. And then me and Dan are going to work together on something eventually. But he's just sort of like, I'm in the post mayhem, and I think he's like trying to regain his life back, but like in the most positive possible way. It's like trying to regain my life back from being loved and famous. And but yeah, so eventually we'll start working on new stuff, and it's good because I'm doing this contract job, which should get me there's a couple of small holes in my technical knowledge and stuff, and I think that maybe they'll be filled and just keeping in practice. And I'm a very new sound designer. Like the first game I ever did sound design on was the Hex. That was a huge trial by fire, and I guess the Hex walked so that Inscription could run sound design wise, because some of the stuff in there, I mean, Dan was all happy with it. I was all happy with it at the time, but I think Inscription was a much more coherent and polished game in terms of sound design. And it can only go up and keep getting better at sound design. And I have fun with it. So yeah.
I have a fun question to end us off, because I kind of like to leave it on a positive note. Here's a kind of hypothetical. If there was a dream composer you could work alongside, who would it be and for what project?
Let's think about this. I actually got a DM from somebody, from Nick Gordon, I guess I'll just say it, which is very exciting. Who's the composer for Doom?
No, yeah, that's a big one. Yeah,
what's up? That was really cool. But and so I'd love to work with him, but it might have to be Darren Korb, who's like
80s composer, right?
No. Darren Korb is the composer for Supergiant games.
Oh yeah, no, but the game Hades. Sorry, that's
Hades. Oh, I thought you said 80s. 80s.
Oh no.
I was like, an 80s composer. Is there an 80s composer named Darren Korb? Yeah, Hades. But the true fans loved are the Bastion, Transistor, Pyre era. I mean, he has killed every single thing that he's worked on, and also is like just a real master of making cool game music. And he didn't even start as like a game music guy. He was just like a good musician that, you know, started working on games, and that's kind of the dream, because he's just like a good musician first and foremost that happens to be writing for games. Yeah, I think I'll always look to him as someone who has done so much for the indie game community in terms of like, no, the music is awesome on its own. The music is new. The music is inventive. It's pushing the medium just like normal music that you buy and think is awesome. Like that's going to happen in the indie game space. And I think, you know, he was a real pioneer for all that kind of stuff. And he's not fallen off in the slightest. So, yeah.
Is there I suppose, a specific game you'd want to work on with him?
A specific game I'd like to work on. I don't know.
There's
Doom
no
12.
I
I want to take the title from Mick Gordon, yeah, and work on the third or fourth Doom with Darren Corbett. No, I don't know. The thing is, I'm not like Darren Corbett's like in-house, you know, at Supergiant, so I don't think they would, you know, even do other composers and stuff. But that would be cool, actually, even to just get him. Like that's maybe more a realistic thing, like either like getting him in on something for something that Dan's doing in the future, or me, you know, hanging out at the Supergiant studios and I don't know, playing mandolin or something on some random track. It'd be great.
Well, fantastic. I'm going to close out the show now. Very quickly, I want to throw back over to you. Where can people kind of find you, Jonah, if they want to kind of keep up with your work? Where's the best way they can do that?
I'll send people to works.rip. That's my like media stuff website, because that's the thing that you probably won't find by Googling my name. So if you're curious about any of the media stuff, you can do it there. Otherwise, I'm on Twitter at Jonah Senzel. I don't tweet very much, but if you like DM me there, I'll probably respond, or email me. I like getting emails. I get a lot of emails, so sometimes I can't respond to them, or sometimes I need to be bugged twice, but I do legitimately enjoy getting emailed from people about, you know, anything and everything. Soundtrack is on Bandcamp and Steam. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you for being a great interviewer. This has been really fun.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to whatever interview is coming up next. And I look forward to seeing whatever project you work on in the future. And Darren Corb, you've been publicly named. Jonah wants to do a track with you, or at least a track, if not a soundtrack. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much.